All right, cool. Off to a good start. Oh my gosh. Streamer fail. Streamer fail. All right, we'll start this all over. All right, so guys, welcome to our monthly show where we talk about movies, TV, and all that stuff and why we like it, why we love it, why we think it's the greatest thing ever. Traditionally, we look at a movie that we see either on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, something that you can stream at home. You know, the barrier to entry is low and we can, get together and talk about it and, digest the movies and stuff, because movies and TV are things that are important to me. I think they're great. I think they're fun. And I like to talk about it. I really do. I mean, before I had the job that I had now, I worked at a movie theater. I sold tickets. My job was to hang out and talk movies with people and occasionally serve beers. It was a pretty rad job. And I still like to talk about movies. And I thought, well, what better way to do that than, bring it with our Twitch community here and get a chance to continue doing that and with as many new people as we can. And, but this is our first bonus episode. The reason why it's a bonus is because it's a brand new release and you had to actually pay to go see it. So we obviously took a look at Star Wars: The Last Jedi, the latest installment in the Star Wars saga, directed by Rian Johnson. We'll get into that in a little bit. But joining me today, one of our subs, exercising his sub perk to join us here on the broadcast, Mr. SteelManBat.
Hello, hello, hello.
For those who don't know, SteelManBat is actually my brother-in-law, fellow clanmate in my Destiny clan. He's an awesome dude and is a pretty big movie buff himself. So I'm excited to have him on today. We just saw it last night, and needless to say, I enjoyed it. But I have things that I want to unpack and discuss. Steel, what is your initial gut impressions before we start talking about Star Wars in general and stuff like that?
Gut impressions of the movie last night?
Yes.
Gut impressions, I was relieved in some ways because after watching a couple of the previews and knowing that this is the middle of the trilogy, I was pretty much anticipating that we were going to end in a very dark, in a very bad, and a very sad place. And I was hoping for the best, but expecting the worst as far as my emotions are concerned. Mm-hmm. And so from after watching that, and spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, you might want to close your ears. But
yeah, to be honest, really, if you haven't seen the movie, do yourself a favor, come back in an hour when we'll be playing Fortnite then, but do yourself a favor, don't be spoiled by this. If you've avoided spoilers this long, don't ruin it. Don't do yourself a favor, get a chance to enjoy the movie. So I just wanted to get that right out of the way. We are going to dive full on into all things Star Wars, everything that has been released up to this point. And by all things Star Wars, I mean just the films, not the Rebels show or the animated series or the books or the comic books. It's just going to be the movies. So anyway, sorry, I wanted to get that out there and up front before we really start diving in.
Right, but so for me as a kid, I didn't wait in the theaters between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So waiting with the intense longing of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to Han Solo? That I didn't feel that like other people did probably that saw it in the theaters. But now that they're coming out live and we're older, I was afraid that if they had this horrible cliffhanger or something really bad had happened, we're going to have to wait another 1 to 2 years to see what happened next. But
right.
And there was definitely some really sad points of this movie. But overall, the feeling of kind of hope in the midst of sadness was more or less a theme. And so that was like a relief, huge relief. And then even though I think it irritated some people because there was so much in this movie, I also kind of liked it because I thought the movie ended about 4 times and it kept going. So as a Star Wars fan, I was really loving it because my movie kept going.
Mm-hmm. I do not disagree. So I guess kind of going into it before we start jumping into The Last Jedi, how did you prepare for this movie? Did you revisit some of the old stuff? If so, which ones did you watch? Did you watch everything, or did you just kind of just jump in?
So I did not do as much prep for this as I would have liked. I watched The Force Awakens just the day before or 2 days before, and that's all I really did. I didn't get into. I watched maybe some of the early previews. I didn't watch any of the recent ones, and then I pretty much stayed off of IMDb or any other social media where people were talking about the movie. So I didn't have a whole lot of expectations other than just going into the movie itself.
Okay. For me personally, I mean, I kind of went on like a personal mission to kind of revisit all the movies as best as I could. I didn't watch any of the prequels because this is just a personal opinion. I do not care for episodes 1, 2, and 3, the preceding to the original trilogy, and I just am not the biggest fan of them. I did enjoy elements of episode 3. I did like seeing, how Darth Vader eventually, or how Anakin eventually became Darth Vader. I liked those moments and that setup, and but there were some things that were a little bit heavy-handed, like the Frankenstein moment where he's finally full-on Vader in the suit and has been, healed up after or has gotten medical attention to deal with the volcanic wounds and all that stuff. And it was like a shot-for-shot, like, homage to Frankenstein, although cute. I felt like was a little, I don't know, unnecessary. And so as far as I'm concerned, I really don't, I acknowledge them as just like a bit of a history lesson of like, okay, this is kind of Anakin's beginning, but beyond that, and maybe a little bit with Obi-Wan Kenobi as well, his relationship to his master, like, okay, I like having that knowledge, but I really don't care to revisit those films. I feel like it's a little too reliant on green screen at the time and a little bit doubling down on technology that maybe wasn't quite ready to take on that kind of workload. But but I did rewatch all the original trilogy. I started with Rogue One chronologically. So
most excellent.
Yeah, and I loved revisiting Rogue One. And the one thing that I loved about that movie too is the moment that movie ends, with Vader coming down the hall, being all just full on Vader. Like one of the few times we really get to see Vader be Vader, like this guy that is legitimately feared for being just a ruthless, powerful being. And we never really get to see him as Vader. But this time we did in, and when I say this time, I mean in Rogue One. And so what's awesome...
He's in full battle mode.
Right, exactly. And just that final just handoff scene of just the Death Star plans working down the hallway and people just getting, lightsabered up and force pulled and choked and pulled and pushed and slammed in just this little death corridor was so exciting and so compelling and in a way kind of frightening. Like, because it puts you in a moment where all these guys are in here, guns pointed down the hallway, they're ready to take on whatever's coming, and, like, you almost see this, like, black cloud kind of filling an even darker section of it. Like, there is something evil that has entered the room. It's almost like the devil has showed up, and then you just hear the... and then just... and the lightsaber comes out, and just hell breaks loose, and it is just... all kinds of terrifying awesome. I loved it so much. And then it tees you up right at the beginning of A New Hope. And when I left Rogue One for the first time, I'm like, I just want to go home and watch A New Hope. And I didn't feed that urge. But this time I did. And I got to say, it elevated A New Hope to a whole new level to me. I mean, as far as the original trilogy goes, it had been my least favorite for a little while. But with Rogue One, I feel like I have this extra, meat, like this extra, like, appetizer that really kind of like made the meal pay off a little bit better. And
well, you understand the momentum and the urgency behind what's happening in a much bigger way than when you first see New Hope without Rogue One.
Right, exactly. And it really just set things up really, really well. And one thing that I also found interesting too was after finishing A New Hope and jumping into Empire, the production difference, like, oh my gosh, it was insane. Just the budget difference, the script, and but you could tell just on like a production value level, it's better film stock, stuff's in much better focus, things just look good. it
well,
looked
like,
a lot better.
Alec Guinness, who played Obi-Wan, I think he was one of the actors that was offered royalties, and he said, "No, I want the cash," because he thought A New Hope was going to be a total bomb.
Whoops.
And oopsies.
Yeah, mistakes were made.
But yeah, you can definitely tell. I hadn't thought about that between the two movies. If we're not sure if this is going to be a cult classic because of how bad it is, and then it becomes a cult classic for how amazing it is in the story.
Sure, and 70s sci-fi movies and space sagas and stuff had really, they're like a dime a dozen, and a lot of them have not done well. And so, I mean, Guinness was probably thinking okay, well, I don't really think this is going anywhere. This seems kind of dumb, and well, look who looks dumb now. It's a good example too of George Lucas being able to maintain merchandising rights and get all these just licenses, and they're like, Fox is saying, sure, whatever, just take it.
Yeah,
it's yours. It's fine.
It's crazy.
And then just becomes this massive juggernaut. And then and I loved Empire. Empire is still my favorite of the original trilogy. It's, as a kid, I liked Return of the Jedi because I thought the Ewoks were cool, and then I grew up and realized I was wrong, and Empire is the superior film. But I do like Return of the Jedi as well. Fun fact: originally called Revenge of the Jedi, or at least there were poster misprints, or that was the original title, and then they switched it right before after test screenings, I think.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I still love Return of the Jedi the best, except that now that they've changed the ending to incorporate the first three, it kind of cheeses it up. But I love I love how you go from this with Jabba the Hutt and the battle at the dunes with the monster that's consuming everyone, and then you end up in this tropical,
the Sarlacc pit.
Yeah, and then you end up in this tropical forest region with little teddy bears running around, and just the different landscapes and the worlds that they created, and the speeder bikes, which was awesome.
Okay, so normally we don't really we'll engage chat occasionally, just because I like to have as free flowing of a dialogue on the show as much as we can, but I have to address this from Captain Steelbeard. He's saying the remake music is better. And he was happy that they took out Yub Nub out of Return of the Jedi. And sir, I disagree. I disagree. And the reason being, okay, and this is even something, as I was watching it, I swear Mrs. McFly is probably just rolling her eyes every time I say it, but I say it every time because this is my childhood, damn it, and they messed with it. And the ending to Return of the Jedi, okay, I understand you need to tie in the prequels and you got to show the other cities, but don't change the music. Come on. And it's so different, and it doesn't even match up with the drum beats that they're doing, and the little bongos on the Empire helmets and stuff. Man, that really it bothered me so much, because every time when that scene comes up, I could see it, I'm almost preemptively playing the scene in my mind, because I've watched that movie on VHS so much as a kid, where I know what's coming and I don't care, but it makes me happy that I know what's coming. And then it's just oh wait, they did, what's this? What is this? And it's always so jarring, and I don't know. And then whenever they put Hayden Christensen in as Anakin, as this Force ghost versus old Anakin, it's why? And I think the reasoning is maybe, yeah, exactly. Is maybe the reasoning is because, well, he's better, or that's when he was still good. It's no, he became good at the last moment before he died. Let him stay old, because that was the final moment that he was still good.
That's really funny. Yeah, I remember him as he ended, and yeah, that's interesting.
Right, exactly. And
I forgot that they switched them.
Mm-hmm. I always forget it too, and when it happens, it's ugh. And I don't remember if they did, if they didn't change Obi-Wan to either be Ewan McGregor or if they let him be Mr. Guinness. That I don't remember.
I don't remember either. It means we have to watch it again.
Probably, and I'm honestly going to. I mean, I love Star Wars. I can never get enough Star Wars. And yeah, for me, and I guess this kind of goes into before we start talking about Force Awakens and eventually, Last Jedi, Steel, what was the first time that you were ever exposed to Star Wars? About how old were you? Did you see it in the theaters? Did you see it at home? Did you see it on? I mean, just kind of go into that for me.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I remember the very, very first time that I saw it. I remember it. It's almost like it was always there as part of my childhood. I was little, like I was probably in elementary school, and I remember watching it on VHS, and we had the little VHS, set. But before that happened, we would just, anytime I wanted to watch it, we'd go to like Blockbuster or the local movie video gallery or whatever, and we'd rent the movie. And I loved it so much because the characters are awesome, and there's like a sense of adventure, and there's all these worlds that they create, and good versus evil, and it's awesome. And then when I was a little bit older, not in high school yet, but they re-released them, the originals, in the theaters, and that was like super special to me. And I went with my dad.
I remember that
because we didn't grow up where we got to see them in the theaters, and that was really cool. And it was interesting. I didn't really have that much of an opinion in a negative way when they added all the digital scenes to the originals. It was more of kind of fun just to see what other stuff that he had maybe thought of or wanted to add at the time that he couldn't because they were limited with animatronics and puppets and stuff. Like Jabba can't be mobile. That one scene at the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, with Han and like when they first meet him on Tatooine. I think originally at the time they didn't know what Jabba was going to be like.
Look like, right? Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Like they thought he was going to be like a human. Like he was going to be like a person, not like a full-on slug thing. Like they hadn't fully decided what Jabba the Hutt or what Jabba was going to be.
Yeah, but Star Wars was like truly a part of my life because, as a small kid, I remember watching it, my dad saying, "Oh yeah, these were great." I remember seeing them in the theaters, and they even have books, and those are amazing. And then watching them in the theaters with my dad, and then the first 3 prequels came out, and I watched all of those, and then all the toys and the video games and the cartoons, and like we lived and breathed Star Wars for like, I don't know, almost the first 2 decades of my life. So it was definitely like a huge part, and we loved it.
Yeah, for me, the first time I saw it was right around actually the same time that I saw Back to the Future. I got 2 very big just movie things dumped on me like within like a week of each other. I remember it very vividly. I was with my dad, and I think we went to like either Radio Shack or Circuit City or Best Buy or somewhere, and I was like 6 or 7 years old, and they had just re-released all of them on a triple VHS pack. And that was my first exposure to Star Wars.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful pack.
Oh, so good. And I just remember seeing him, watching him with my dad, even though he just passed out and was just snoring through the whole thing. I didn't care. I sat up and I got closer, and I'm very much like you. I lived and breathed, Star Wars. I really just could not get enough of it. Action figures and just, playing with those, watching the movies. And I had like an old TV like in my bedroom that had like a little VHS player built into the TV, and it had like rabbit ears and everything. Like it was a pretty bad TV, and it was like maybe it was pretty bad, but I could, it played movies okay. And so in my room, I would just watch Star Wars constantly. And oh my gosh, it was just all I wanted to do. And that's really just kind of what drew me in. And, I do kind of agree. I do like some of the stuff that they did, or set extensions or things like that couldn't have been done at the time. Or, I don't know, they lacked that possibility. And also, some of the restoring was nice. I got to see those in the theater as well. So that was my first time seeing Star Wars in the theaters, was during the re-release with the changes.
Right.
That was an experience. It was really cool, and I was glad I got a chance to have that moment, and have that moment as a kid. It was really rewarding.
Yeah, for sure.
But out of the 3 of the originals, what would be your personal favorite?
The originals, I still think I like Return of the Jedi the best. I think I like it because it kind of is like the culmination of the plot line that's been playing out through the 3 movies, and so you get to see kind of everything like come to fruition, and you get to see Darth Vader finally like make a good choice, and they have that epic battle scene with the Emperor, and Han is freed, and it's like all this action and good stuff happening, and the teddy bears attacking the AT-ATs and exploding them. It's just it's so good.
And I know we may get some flack for this, but personally, I say AT-AT, but I've also been told it's AT-AT.
Yes.
And I think it just depends on I think it's a generational thing. I really do. Because, like, okay, the 2-legged walker is an AT-ST. So you wouldn't call it an AT-ST or an AT-Saint or something. No, it's an AT-ST. So that would mean the bigger one is an AT-AT. Right?
That's what I say.
Yeah, I think that's logical.
Yes, we must be logical about this.
Yes,
I was
totally.
actually concerned as I was singing. I was like, wait, is that the AT-AT or the other one? Oh my gosh, what am I saying?
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where like I've been on shoots where we've talked about Star Wars properties, and that is something that inevitably comes up, and I'm like one of the only ones, and I'm also the youngest one. But I look at everybody, I'm like, you're wrong. You guys are just wrong. You're all old and wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You're dumb. And yeah. So I personally say
it with your face, but I don't understand you.
That's right. I don't know what jargon you're saying, but I know it as an AT-ST.
That's funny.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, there's a few people in chat that are agreeing as well. So
that's good.
We are right.
Yes.
It's not AT-AT. You're wrong. I don't care. And I know there's famous people that would say otherwise, but no.
This is America.
This is America, and it's AT-AT. Anyway, so Force Awakens. Absolutely loved that movie.
So good.
Yeah, it felt like a love letter to anybody that was a Star Wars fan. It just... Oh my gosh. It had a lot of the same beats and flows of the original movies, which some would say was playing it safe. Personally, I loved the hell out of it. I felt like there was a lot of heart. There was a lot of soul in Force Awakens. And we actually watched it together on Saturday, the day before we went and saw Last Jedi. And one thing that always kind of stuck out to me with Force Awakens was the characters. And this is something that, director J.J. Abrams has just a really solid skill with, being able to really pull just like something special out of his actors. I don't know, like.
Well, with Lost, I mean, he focuses so much on the story and the people, and he loves it. And you can totally see it in Force Awakens.
Right. And also, too, like, you could tell this was a movie made by somebody that loved Star Wars. This is somebody that really, really likes Star Wars a lot. And, I mean, and what was also kind of fun, too, with Rey, this person that every time I see her in Force Awakens, I just see this little girl inside an adult body, like a kid, putting on the helmet after she has her dinner, like in her destroyed AT-AT that she lives in, and but she's like looking around. She's got a little like straw rebel pilot doll in her little home, and slides down the hill on like a piece of scrap, like a kid would do. Like, hey, how am I gonna get down this big old sand hill? No, I'll just slide down like I'm on a sled. Like that's a very like kid-like thought process. And
right.
And just with everybody too, like with Poe Dameron and Finn and all those new characters that we got introduced to, I connected with. I was excited by them. They had such this I guess you could say there's like an idealism inside of them, and it was contagious. There was this energy that they all had.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's like an innocence to all the characters and like an idealism where, the like Poe, is excited about the rebellion and believes in his cause, and Rey and Finn are like just getting into the thick of things and their friendship, and there's kind of that like excitement and giddiness about it, which makes it really fun to watch.
Exactly. And I enjoyed the hell out of Force Awakens. It was fun.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in the whole movie is the opening, not opening, but the first sequence where they're flying the Millennium Falcon through that giant chase scene. And I was like, this is amazing, because they could do so much now with the graphics that they couldn't do in the old films, even though those were amazing. But just the nostalgia of seeing it fly and then watch them get excited as they're piloting and then flying through the massive Empire ship. It was so beautiful in every way.
Right. And also too, like, one thing that I appreciated about Force Awakens too was the seeing things shot in a different sense. So like watching, Finn from the beach when they're attacking where Maz is. Like where Finn and Han and Rey are all there trying to, get set up to go on to the next part of the journey. And you're on the beach over Finn's shoulder, and you're watching Poe Dameron just pilot his X-Wing around and just, literally flying circles around TIE fighters and just blowing stuff up and gunning guys down on the beach and flying by. And you just see this, like, it's just totally different. Normally we would fly behind the X-Wing and watch it do its thing. But now we're watching it from the ground, from a character's perspective who is also in awe like we are, of just like, wow, look at him go. And it was so different from a Star Wars movie. And I really appreciated, just the new vision, like a fresh set of eyes, but a fresh set of eyes that also loved Star Wars. And
also the ability to bring in new characters without reducing the old characters.
Right, yeah. And I guess you could say too, this movie is kind of Force Awakens was kind of the proverbial passing of the torch of, bringing the new characters in, acknowledging their agency, and then kind of continuing with them. And then I guess you could say the ultimate passing of the torch was in Last Jedi of, now the journey continues without some people.
Spoiler.
Yeah, seriously, we're getting basically into like your final spoiler check. If you have not seen Last Jedi, this is kind of your last call for being spoiled. So, yeah. At this point, you're doing it to yourself, and you can only be mad at you. You can't be mad at me anymore.
Don't look at the light.
Yes. So, anyways, without further ado, we'll kind of dive into our discussion of Last Jedi. But before we do, I'm going to toss up the teaser for Last Jedi as a bit of a refresher for everybody. So I'll go ahead and get that queued up for you guys.
Let the past die. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be.
Darkness rises, and light to meet it.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Come on! This is not going to go the way you think.
So that was from Star Wars The Last Jedi, the latest installment in the Star Wars saga, directed by the wonderful Rian Johnson. Stars Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Mark Hamill, Oscar Isaac, and the late Carrie Fisher. Kind of the plot summary here. As per IMDb, Rey develops her newly discovered abilities with the guidance of Luke Skywalker, who is unsettled by the strength of her powers. Meanwhile, the Resistance prepares to do battle with the First Order. So this movie picks up not too long after the events of The Force Awakens. So the Resistance is, basically what we now know of the, it's basically the Rebel Alliance, but kind of they're on the ropes here. They're not doing so hot, even though they've kicked the Death Star and they've destroyed Starkiller Base, but they kind of are in an odd spot, and they don't seem like they're winning particularly well. And so the beginning of this movie opens up, with a fighter attack, or there's an escape actually. So it's Carrie Fisher with as Princess Leia, and Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, and their base is under attack and they're trying to get out. And we see maybe one of the first few changes and maybe what is kind of a theme of the movie, where there is this call to maybe not blindly follow your leaders anymore, or maybe your leaders have a bigger plan and they're maybe not wanting to share it with you. I don't know. It was one of those things where I was just kind of like really, I don't know, irked by that a little bit. But anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But overall, though, my initial impressions of the movie, I did enjoy it. I have some gripes. But overall, though, I had a good time with the film. I did enjoy it, but it was very much a different Star Wars movie compared to films that have preceded it. It is drastically different. It's not as heartwarming. It's a little bit somber. And I don't know. To me, it didn't quite feel like a full-on... It didn't feel like Star Wars in the sense that I'm accustomed with. But that seems like that was the intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting. I feel like the overall... So kind of what you said that you loved about Force Awakens, I think why so many people loved it is because it was kind of, like you said, a love letter to Star Wars fans. Like it was a nostalgia dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Where people that love and cherish the original trilogy, they kind of get that feeling again of, oh, yes, this is amazing. And they do some things new, but a lot of it is kind of honoring the original story and the original characters. And there's this newness to the characters and a lot of hope to the characters. And I feel like in this movie, one of the overarching themes is kind of like, it's almost like a maturing of the characters, where Poe Dameron, even though he's the best fighter in the galaxy, arguably his decision making is challenged by his leaders, and as the viewer, you don't really know which side of the fence you are, right? You kind of back him up, and you're like, well, maybe he's wrong. And I feel like the movie forces you to do that several times with each of the characters to decide whether or not you agree with their decision making or not. And you kind of watch the character make decisions for good or bad throughout the movie and kind of see those choices play out as they're kind of growing up. So I think that's kind of like a hard thing, because it's hard to watch people make choices when they don't always work out the right way. Mm-hmm. And when you see, and especially when you see the bigger impact of it. And so from a story perspective, it's really interesting. And I think that was really cool that they did that. But as far as how it fits into the regular Star Wars movies and the feeling of it, it is very different.
Right. And to me also, another thing that felt very different as well was the scope of what was happening. Like the way combat was shown, the way, we saw like machinery, the way that we saw, things fighting. Even though we're seeing very large things, everything still felt kind of small, scope-wise. I don't know. To me, that's just like a personal perception, but it felt like we were looking at like during the bombing of the Dreadnought scene in the very beginning of the film. we spent a lot of times like with Poe, like, you know, very much kind of like how we were talking about with Force Awakens, you know, seeing it in a very different way and watching them, you know, see us from a different perspective, but seeing him move. But now we're spending a lot of time in the cockpit, and we're just kind of just watching him, you know, shuffle around his pilot seat and stuff like that. And then also the idea of challenging stuff and then not trusting your leaders was, I mean, at the same time, like, I think that's kind of a cool idea, but it felt like it was done a little bit in excess in this movie, especially with Laura Dern's character playing, the Vice Admiral Holdo.
Purple hair.
Yeah, purple hair. Even though, yeah, purple hair is cool, that to me that was a very distracting costume choice. But Laura Dern was
there has
great.
to be a reason, but I don't know what it is.
Exactly. I mean, if you're gonna give us a reason to give Laura Dern purple hair, I mean, come on. And I've also been told, I haven't seen Twin Peaks, the TV show or the movie, but apparently her character has pink hair. So Laura Dern has now had pink hair and purple hair in two very prominent
funny.
roles, which is pretty funny. Captain Steelbeard says he calls her Vice Admiral Hot Topic. Well, I guess that's cool too. And also another thing that Steelbeard said that I thought was a pretty interesting point was he thinks the major message of the movie was the hero's journey is dead, and heroes and villains are the same. It did feel like there was a little bit of commentary on, I think, tradition, the hero's journey, the past of Star Wars, and then the future of Star Wars. I think a lot of the stuff that kind of unfolds within this film is we are ready to leave everything behind, and we kind of don't really need anybody anymore, is kind of how it felt to me.
So I would agree a little bit, but I would also disagree. And here's where I would disagree. So there's spoiler. There's a scene where the ancient, like, more, I don't know what else to call it better than like the library or the Church of the Jedi, right, goes up in flames, and Yoda and Luke are having a conversation about it. And at first I was thinking, wow, this is kind of the dismantling of the ancient order and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I felt like Yoda was espousing is that it's not, things haven't changed so much, but I feel like he was trying to set free an over adherence to the structure. And so I normally would have, and I think the thing that Kylo was more or less saying is that, you know, that heroes and the villains are the same, and they kind of show that the weapons come from the same place, and this is two sides of a coin, that kind of a thing. But the way that the movie ends, there's definitely a line in the sand between the two, and there's kind of a regrouping, and Kylo kind of takes his solo approach. I'm going to do this on my own, even to the extent of mutiny within his ranks, and then you have the rebel side that draw together and build off of each other. Yeah. And so I think it shows kind of the two approaches to how they handle it, and I think it shows that the heroes, that, you know, we can't do it alone. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to show with Poe, with him taking like the lone gunslinger approach. I'm going to go in, and no matter how many people we lose, we're going to destroy the ships. And I think that the message they're trying to show is that
kind of like like a polar opposite Han Solo. Instead of wanting to run from a fight and self-preserve, it's still being like a crazy gunman shooting from the hip, but instead of self-preservation, like overly wanting to fight for the Alliance, like almost at too much of a cost, or regardless of the cost.
Don't be a kamikaze, right? Live to fight another day. Look at the long game, and we may lose this battle, but we'll win the war at the end of the day. And so anyway, that's my thoughts.
Sure, and I do agree with what's going on, and honestly too, like with Rey and Kylo Ren, with the betrayal of Snoke. Literally, I don't know if he was quite stabbed in the back. He was kind of stabbed in the side. But, I mean, literally having a coup within the First Order, within the room, was a hell of a turn. Something I did not expect. And especially in the way that it was done was so cool. Like, hearing Snoke, like, close his eyes, and he's watching Ren go through the thought process of what he was going to do, like talking about how he's getting ready to activate the lightsaber, and then just and you just hear it, you just see it, Luke's lightsaber turning and just goes right through him, was so cool. And then, that whole fight sequence with, I'm assuming, were the Knights of Ren, the other Jedi in training that Ben took from Luke's temple, and then the rest were killed per Luke, as according to Luke. I'm assuming those were those students, because I think there were 6 in the room, because I think there were 12, and so there were 11 that were still there. He took 6, and then they killed the other 5. I don't know if that's true or not. It wasn't clearly stated, at least to me. But one thing that I do find interesting is, and even like we know when they're fighting over the lightsaber, we're looking at 2 sides that are trying to accomplish more or less kind of the same thing, just much like what you were saying, Steel, but at a very, very different approach.
Right.
One, is trying to go through, essentially he's doing exactly what the Empire has been doing all along. It's almost like a no change. It's just a change of the guard, or the name is changed.
Right.
But more or less the vision and the path remains the same. It's just a different person's at the driver's seat. Whereas with Rey, it's similar but different to the Resistance, in the sense that she is acknowledging that maybe the Empire isn't straight up the enemy, maybe trying to strike real balance and come together with Ben and be, see eye to eye, and then try to have achieve some sense of symbiosis or something, to where, much like the island, when Luke is talking about the Jedi Island on the original temple, there's, and with with Rey going through her little force feeling, talking about how she sees life, she sees death, there's decay, but there's life growing from decay. The island is existing in life, but there's ocean waves trying to crash against it to break it down. But amongst it, there's balance. For everything that's living, something's dying, and so, but they're in harmony together. And I think Rey sees that, and so maybe what her ultimate approach is going to be is trying to find a way to have the darkness and the light achieve that kind of symbiosis, but amongst the people throughout the galaxy. Maybe that's like the ultimate goal that she's chasing. I'm not quite sure, but
yeah, and maybe also she's thinking that the death in Kylo Ren's life, from those ashes, new life can spring forth. And I think she's thinking that she has this idealistic hope that he can be saved and he can be turned, just
right.
like with Vader.
And then she even said that's why she must go to him, because she thought she had a vision that if she goes, he could turn back. He could come back to the light. She believes it. And I don't know if she still believes it after what has unfolded, but...
And one thing I did like is that even though she's much more kind of angry and aggressive in this than The Force Awakens, she still maintained her hope, which I really do like, because she was definitely a symbol of hope in the first movie, where she, against all odds, she's going to believe the best in people around her and in the cause and all that kind of stuff. And so even with Kylo Ren making his own decision, she didn't let that taint her ability to hold fast to that, and I really liked that.
Yeah, it was inspiring to see her maintain a sense of purity and zen and centeredness despite what was happening around her, which I guess in a way, makes her, they almost treat her like a master in a sense. When she's on the island, with Luke there, she's already coming across as someone that already has great control of the Force, even though has only recently tapped into it. And now she is the only living Jedi. And I guess through Luke, she might be able to continue her training and become, the future of the Jedi, and whatever that means. And I guess that kind of, on the topic of Luke, I guess we could talk about, what happens with Luke Skywalker. How we're introduced to him and ultimately what becomes of, the legend of the galaxy, as they call him in the film, as someone that was starting to become myth, but then, makes one final last, interesting goodbye, to a character that, has been, beloved and, flawed, but also, still ultimately good despite temptations that he had along the way. I find the way like that he dupes Kylo Ren, and you just and to me, like when we first see Luke inside that bunker and he's got the brown goatee and a shorter haircut, I was like, did he really just clean up just for this? I was
do
like,
a little hair dye.
yeah, and I was like, gosh, what a lazy edit. This is really bad. Some producer needs to get fired. And that's like, oh, wait a second. And then you find out it's Luke projecting an image of himself across the galaxy to pretend fight Kylo Ren was epic. And
That
honestly,
was a very epic scene.
yeah, I gave an internal clap for that. I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool, display of the Force, being able to actually project yourself in front of a lot of people's eyeballs at once. That's pretty amazing.
And to give the kind of tip off, the nonchalant, kind of catch you later move that he did at the end.
Yeah,
That was
good try,
awesome.
bud. Peace. See you later. And he just disappears. I thought that was cool. I thought it was neat.
Yeah.
Oh, and Steelbeard was saying Luke's image was designed specifically to look like he did the night before he killed Ben. So I guess like of that age, I guess to trigger Ben's rage. I guess that makes sense. It's pretty sinister. It's kind of rude. But at the same time though, it was cool. And ultimately, I guess the amount of effort it required, ultimately cost Luke his life. But I guess in the manner of which that he gave his life, it allows him to pass on very much like Yoda did. And I guess almost like Obi-Wan as well.
Giving his life for something that matters so he can be at peace, because he was hidden and just wanting to die from feeling like he had been ineffective.
Right. And, the whole reason that he had just gone to that island was to run and was to die. He exiled himself intentionally from just the burden of feeling like he was a failure, that it's his fault that that Ben became Kylo Ren, that half of his students were butchered by his other students, and like that they tore themselves apart. He feels solely responsible for it. In a way, it's not totally his fault. And it was interesting to kind of see the different perspectives of Kylo Ren and Luke going through what happened.
Yeah, I feel like that part of the story was actually very J.J. Abrams-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the different, you get to see the different plot lines and you don't really know who to believe.
Yeah, like he said, she said kind of thing. Like you're not quite sure who to believe. Like who's fully right? Who's really telling me the truth? Are we gonna see the truth, or are we relying on one person's account versus another and kind of stringing our own truth together?
Yeah, but I liked them showing kind of the humanity and the struggle of Luke, and how he was struggling with, okay, I did this amazing thing, whether by design or by luck, I'm not really sure, but now I'm this superstar Jedi, and I need to act like it. And so you kind of saw that the toll that it took on him, and he was trying to be the hero, and then when this tragedy happens, he blames himself for not being strong enough, when really, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't really his fault. It's just, you can't, even the strongest of Jedi, you can't control other people completely.
Exactly. It's almost like there is still free will, and even though Ben, it appeared to Luke that he was going to be making the wrong choice and go to the dark side, I guess Ben internally had not made that choice, and Luke just drawing his lightsaber was enough to tip the scale. Like his heart was that fragile at the moment. Like he was ready to tip.
Right.
And in a way, that's sad. And then kind of like the events that have unfolded with Kylo Ren, you could almost say he's now gone from, well, is this saga, this section of the Star Wars universe in this storyline, is this going to be the redemption of Kylo Ren? And I think what we find out now in The Last Jedi is probably not. He's not going to go the same path as his grandfather in Vader and become horrible and evil and then turn back. I think he might be going down the path of just permanently, putting himself in the dark side and just, everything ending in a negative sense for him. I don't think he's gonna. I don't know if we're gonna have a redemption moment for Kylo Ren or Ben Kenobi anymore. I don't think it's gonna work out for him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Rey said the same thing that Han said in Force Awakens. It's not too late. You can come back, and he's been given multiple options to come back, and he always chooses the power because he thinks. I don't know if he's fooling himself or if he really believes his own crap of this is the way it needs to be, when it's really just a power play for him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it almost feels like too, he's now at a point now where he is finding comfort and solace in just this rage and in the darkness. He now feels like, I don't know, it makes me sad to see it, because you see these moments when they're kind of like, I guess, force meditating with each other, where they're almost able to touch, and they are, you could see, and I want to say it's genuine. I really do. I want to say that there still is a conflict within Ben, and I think it's going to lead to stumbles with him as now the new supreme leader of the First Order. I think it's going to cause hesitation with him, and I think it's going to ultimately dismantle him.
Yeah, you saw the scene where he took his finger off the trigger with the rebel frigate that was carrying Leia, right? And so they showed different scenes like that where he made a choice towards a softer, less dark side of himself. But whether or not that's the remnant or he kills it at the end, we'll have to wait and see.
Right, exactly.
But for sure, it's already. I mean, you can see there's dissent in his own ranks of people that don't agree, because they see how fanatical he is and unhinged. About wanting to kill Luke and snuff out the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, and another thing too. Another thing from Captain Steelbeard. He said he's just waiting for Hux's sudden but inevitable betrayal. I don't know if Hux has the balls or the confidence to go against someone who can literally fling him across the room with their mind. I think he will follow whoever is in charge that has the Force, because he is he doesn't have the power to stand up to somebody in the same room like that. Even though he's willing to talk down to any, Imperial or First Order soldier, I don't think he would betray Ren. If he does, oh man,
he does have the drive though, because he walked up and unholstered his blaster. When he thought Ben was out. And
he was maybe about to shoot him just to be sure.
He very quickly holstered that.
He did. That's a good catch. And I did kind of find it funny that Domhnall Gleeson became kind of like our Doomnell or Domhnall.
However you say it is good. I don't know.
But anyway, the gentleman that plays General Hux. I do like that he kind of became like the comedic relief a little bit in this movie.
Right, got slammed against the wall, and
he became like this physical humor dude, but a very serious guy beforehand. I thought that was kind of fun. It's different, a little unexpected. And then I guess kind of going down the cast sheet here, I thought Carrie Fisher did a great job with Leia.
I agree with you. Yeah, I was impressed, especially because I didn't feel that way in Force Awakens. I felt like she was kind of one of the weaker ones. Right. And I didn't realize they were going to center so much of the movie around her. And when I found that out, I was like, oh, no.
I know.
But
But I think,
hat
I think
off
they did
to
her
her.
well.
She did great.
And honestly, during the film, I was looking for face replacement, and
I couldn't see it at all.
I could not tell if and when it happened. I know they did. I know she had at least a scene that was big that she unfortunately didn't get a chance to film. But I could not tell when that was. I could not.
Unlike the Man of Steel's mustache.
Yeah, very much unlike that in Justice League, so I've been told.
Yeah.
Oh, and then John Boyega as Finn. A very different Finn. A very different Finn from before.
Yeah, I think two of the characters that were most different in this movie was Poe and Finn, because you see them kind of changing a lot and making different decisions than they would have in the first movie, and then and then afterwards struggling with those decisions.
Right,
So,
like in Force Awakens, Finn is, and there is elements of it, like, he's always wanting to run. He does not want to go toe-to-toe with the First Order, period. He just does not want to. He's terrified. And rightfully so. He was kidnapped as a kid, he was tortured, and brainwashed and forced to fight in a war that he did not want to fight, and fight for people he did not want to fight for. And so I can understand his willingness. But in Last Jedi, he seemed a little bit more confident despite being in like a coma. I don't know. It was pretty different.
Yeah, I think they. So what's interesting about this movie is they basically ran like 4 or 5 parallel storylines all at the same time, hashing back and forth. So you had like almost a origin story, not an origin story, but a story, a full-on story for each one, kind of a climax and change and fall and then redemption kind of part for each of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a lot to cover, and I think with him, I think he's a good actor, but his character is a lot more bull in the china cabinet type character. And so he's a little rough around the edges, and sometimes when he has confidence, he has too much confidence and doesn't really know what he's getting into until he's in it, and then he's, oh crap, where's the exit?
I know. And he's just always just like trying to like, nonchalantly cover it up, like, oh yeah, I'm just checking this stuff out. How are you? and things like that, and just trying to like just pass it off like it's no big deal. And I thought that was still kind of fun, but he felt a lot more confident despite, what perceived to me like not a lot of time, or he hadn't been conscious very long, when he shows up naked in that little leaking bag and just whatever. It was really funny. But then I thought Andy Serkis as Snoke was awesome.
That was excellent, and I could not typically when I hear him do voice roles for other people, I can usually hear a little bit of his core voice, and I really could not. I believed hook, line, and sinker that this was Snoke. I couldn't hear Andy in it at all.
Yeah, and I'm sure he motion capped for it as well. I mean, he's the kind of person I doubt would just sit in a room and just speak. I would almost believe he was on set during the filming.
Right.
But one thing that I found interesting, and also kind of goes in line with, maybe it's, you don't need to go the old way, but like we don't really get to know much about Snoke at all. Even though we finally are now in the room where we get to see him, we get to see this big puppet master in the back. Ironically, Andy Serkis, also a puppeteer as well, which also I think is kind of ironic. But this guy that's in charge, and we just literally cut right through him. And
cut to the chase.
Yeah, literally, just boom, ba, ba. And we don't really get much with them at all, or as not much as I was expecting. And, in a way I was a little bummed. I was surprised. But it was still kind of cool though. Like I was still very comfortable, and I liked the way that sequence played out with Ren and Rey and Snoke and the Knights in that room. I thought that was a very unexpected take on what we traditionally would have expected from previous Star Wars films, where there will be a great temptation, there will be a fight, and then someone's going to escape at the last moment. You know,
Yeah.
we didn't quite have that. And if anything, what was even more unique is we got to see, you know, the polar opposite sides of both Jedis fight not against each other, but with each other, and on the same side for a little bit.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Exactly, and that felt very true. Like, okay, you know, Rey clearly doesn't like anybody in the room. They're bad guys. And Ren is like, I see an opportunity here. I'm going to take it. And
right.
For that brief moment, there's this understanding of we're on the same side for just a brief moment. And then I guess this kind of reminded me too with Rey and Ben. And I know within the film they talk about her parentage and her origin and how they're nobody special. But this is all coming from Ren's mouth. And it personally makes me think that may still not be true.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of power. So obviously, like, names are a big deal and heritage and all that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of power that comes from knowing where you came from, and especially if there's a heritage and legacy that can be passed on, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think he intentionally torpedoes any chance of that by telling her what he does to keep her in a subservient state, because he's been training for all these years, and then all of a sudden she shows up and can take him head on, almost toe to toe. And so I think he's afraid that if he doesn't do something to keep her down, that she's going to pass him up, which I think is why he takes the move to take out Snoke. Personally,
I like that. I like that perspective, because I read a couple reviews today, and one of them was on /film.com, and they were briefly talking about it. And specifically that segment where, you know, and we talked about this earlier in our discussion of Last Jedi already, where the idea of legacy and what came before, what preceded Star Wars, and kind of the traditional flow, using your phrasing, you know, it's being torpedoed, it's being blown up. We don't have to do it this way anymore. Guess what? We're not doing it this way anymore. This is a new way. And so part of me is like, is conflicted on how to perceive the information that was given to me in the movie. Do I accept what Ren said and say, okay, Rey truly is nobody but has an incredible strength with the Force? Or is he, like with your observation, is he holding the cards close to his chest and is trying to keep her in a position where she won't look into it anymore, because that might awaken her powers even more, and then, you know, maybe ultimately pass him in ability, and then ultimately to his demise because he didn't manage it or didn't, you know, capitalize on a moment. I don't know. It's hard to say. And this is the other thing as well. When they were able to force, like, see each other, like during their meditation, like actually they could see each other. Rey was able to actually see where he was and, like, his surroundings and him totally. Whereas Ren could only see her and could see her completely, but couldn't see anything around her. The only other time that we were shown this, and we were shown this in the movie, Luke and Leia were able to do the same thing, or at least able to communicate with each other directly.
Right.
They were linked. They are also siblings. Rey and to me this points another, to me this is another check mark or another thing to put in the list of, hey, maybe Rey and Ren or Ben, Rey and Ben are indeed siblings, but nobody wants to tell us yet. I don't know. Maybe that's the special box, or that's the secret that JJ is going to pull out in episode 9. I personally hope that that's the case. It's one of the things I was hoping to see. But it may or may not happen. I want it to. I really do. And that's kind of the fanboy in me hoping for it. But based on that as well, it's like that is an example of, you know, characters being able to communicate with each other in that way. But I don't know. And Steelbeard in chat saying, my theory is they're half siblings. And so if they were half siblings, I mean, how would the parentage be? It would have to be a Skywalker. if they're trying to still go along the lines of, you know, the Force being strong in people's families.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. That's gonna be an interesting play, but I'm excited to see. I'm really excited to see how Abrams will take this. I'm kind of glad that he took a step back on this movie so that we could see a little bit of a different perspective in the middle. But I'm also glad that he's helming it up in the next one to kind of finish out this trilogy, because I think his hands have kind of been in the mix anyway throughout this whole process. So I think he's got some tricks up his sleeve personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And gosh, and kind of just, we're kind of getting to near the end here, but I also thought, you know, Del Toro's character was very interesting. It very much felt like the Collector was inserted into Star Wars,
yes,
but with like a different quirk. Instead of like, you know, just this like Hannibal Lecter style thing, he had Tourette's. And,
yeah.
But I still found it very interesting. I thought he did a great job. The brief appearance that we had with Maz, I thought was fun. I hope we get to see what she's doing, what she's fighting, and how that's working out for the rebellion. I hope we get a moment for that. And I am looking forward to episode 9. You know, I did enjoy this film. I did not enjoy it as much as Force Awakens, but I appreciated what we got. I'm ready to see what happens next. Like, I want to know where we go from here. It's kind of where I'm at now.
Me too. Yeah, I think I agree. I'm ready for the next chapter, and I think that I really actually very enjoyed this movie, but I also anticipated that it would be very sad and heart-wrenching. And I think because it had a little bit more hope and a little bit more humor to it near the end, I think it made me enjoy it even more than I thought I would.
Right.
So,
well, alrighty, guys, that's gonna that'll do it for us today on our bonus episode of AV Club. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time here, this is a monthly thing that we do. We traditionally do stuff through either Netflix or Amazon Prime, things that are streamable. This being a bonus episode because you had to go into the theaters. We will be doing our next official normal episode on Friday this week, the 22nd, where we'll be taking a look at Gremlins and other holiday films and stuff like that, which is available on Netflix this month. And before we wrap up, Steelman, where could we find you on the internet if you have anything that you would like to shout out?
what'd you say at the end?
I was saying if you have anything that you would like to shout out, like where you can be found, if you want to be found, or if you just want to remain anonymous.
Oh, that's a good point. I will have to find a home in this new galaxy that I'm embarking.
You can sometimes find him lurking in chat. He sometimes stops by and hangs out with us here on Twitch.
Yeah. For now, that'll be good, and then I'll find a more permanent place.
And guys, if this is your first time here, if you're listening to this later, we do record this and broadcast this live on Twitch, so twitch.tv/CaptainMcFly. You can also find me on Twitter at CaptainMcFlyTV. You can also Google myself. You'll probably find me. If you just Google Captain McFly, you'll find me. We are pushing this stuff out to YouTube and also out to iTunes very soon. So if you want to catch us there, if you maybe didn't want to be spoiled, you can listen to it later. And thank you so much. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us this evening. And Steelman, thank you for hanging out and for joining me. I hope we can get you on another one very soon.
Absolutely, I loved it. Hope to be on again very soon. And may the Force be with us all.
Yes, and may the Force be with you guys. Take it easy. I'm gonna close things down, and we're gonna switch over to playing some Fortnite. And I'll see you guys in a bit. Thank you.